Hello everyone. Since I'm going to be discussing how to heat press onto leather, I first wanted to touch upon the product that I'm going to be using to make it clear that you know what transfer paper to use for leather. So this is a product made by Johto Imaging. The website is https://johtoimigingsupplies.com. And the name of the product is Parapi CL Leather/Wood Heat Transfer Paper. So you can see here, this laser transfer paper is ideal for porous hard surface substrates such as leather, wood, cardboard, etc. It has a protective polymer background and soft hand. Using a mirrored design, this transfer paper should be pressed at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 seconds using a medium to heavy pressure. So you can buy this in packs of 100. Unfortunately, it's hard to get it for smaller quantities. Some places sell it, but not as many places as should, quite frankly. And you can buy 100 of them for about $85. So I'm going to go down here and show you the basic description. It's ideal for porous surfaces, thin, flexible, and durable, and easy to peel. You can see here it provides specifications. There's also instructions. It literally gives you the procedure for doing it. And I'm going to do my own video on this, but they actually do have their own instruction for this. You can even watch a little video where they show you how to do this using Corel Draw, using a fairly nice heat press. It's possible to use an iron, but it's a little bit challenging, to be honest with you, to get a uniform temperature. That's the problem with using an iron. And getting an iron to do a specific temperature is the other issue. But there are videos that show you how to do it with an iron as well, just not here. So you can also download a couple of PDF files that give instructions. Ultimately, this is the product that I'm going to be covering. The version of Adobe Illustrator that I'm using, CS3, it's all I can afford, doesn't have a reverse print option that I could find. So before I print out anything onto this printer, as you can see here, I reversed this with the reflect option, which is right, I believe it's here. As you can see here, if you go down to the reflect tool, that's what I used in order to be able to flip the image the way it needs to be. When you go to print this out, you're going to flip it upside down, and that's going to make all the lettering come out correctly. But you have to print it out backwards, or the reflection of it, the mirror reflection of it first. Okay, you see here I've got a bunch of different pieces of leather that have been laid out, and I've done printing on them so I can demonstrate what kind of challenges you're going to face in using heat transfer paper on leather. Now that's a piece of chromium. You can see that the image didn't quite press on properly. And this is a little bit thinner piece of chromium. You can see the heat press actually cause it to shrink and curl. That's ruined once it does that. You can see on the patina on the underside, it actually burned the leather. And now some chromium works well, some doesn't. That's one of the challenges you're going to face in trying to do heat press onto leather. This is a different type of chromium leather that's a little bit thicker, and it managed to handle the heat of the heat press quite well, and the heat transfer paper actually stuck nicely. So it really is anyone's game as far as what works and what doesn't. Now I do believe it boils down to some of the oils that you're going to have in these different products. I wish I had a copy or an example of vegetable tan in particular, but I don't. And there's another couple of examples of chromium where the transfer paper didn't quite stick right. This one was a real bad example of it because literally sections of the heat transfer paper didn't even stick to the leather. And a lot of that has to do with pressure. You have to have a good strong pressure on the image in order for it to stick to a porous surface. or you're going to end up with issues like this where the transfer paper doesn't quite stick to other areas. The other challenge you're going to face is some heat presses don't evenly distribute the heat. So you have to have a heat press that has an even distribution of heat in order for it to work properly on transfer paper for leather in particular. Because of the porous aspects of the surface, it has to have an even distribution of heat. Now, when you lay down transfer paper on some items like this, you'll see that transfer paper doesn't work as well with items that get folded a lot and are constantly being twisted and used heavily. And the transfer paper wrinkles and kind of damages the overall look, unfortunately. It tends to work a lot better with something that's going to be flat and it's going to stay consistently the same, like this. Since that will never fold or never twist, that transfer paper is more than likely going to stand up a lot better, because it ruins the transfer paper when you have to fold it. So that's an example of chromium that I did for a cell phone case. Now, the one type of leather that I've never had a problem with is actually lamb hide. I didn't print this out in color. I colored it after the fact, but you can see it turned out quite nicely. The lamb hide took the heat transfer beautifully. I've never had lamb hide not work for heat transfer. I don't know why it handles heat so well, but it does. And it's a great covering material. If you want to take and cover something with leather, you can print onto a piece of lamb hide and then cover whatever it is you want to cover. And more often than not, that actually looks pretty nicely. So now I've covered different types of leather. I'm going to move on to the next stage, and that's to actually show you the process for doing heat transfer. When you set to the task of actually printing whatever it is you've created in your draw program, paint program, whatever you're using, you've already reflected or reversed the actual image in your computer, so it's now ready to print. The next thing to do is determine exactly how to print on your printer. Now, this is a Brother color laser printer. It's about one of the cheapest color laser printers you can buy, and it's also one of the few that you can physically refill. So you might consider it as an option. It doesn't have the best resolution, but as printers go, it's pretty good for something like this. I think I paid $200 total for it. So what you're going to do, now that you're ready to go, you want to determine exactly where the print side is on the paper in your printer. So you see here, I'm going to open up the printer. I'm going to actually mark an arrow on a corner so that I know what side it prints on and what side it doesn't. I'll slide it back in, go back to my computer, and then I'll initiate the print. You're trying to determine exactly what side prints on, because that transfer paper, when you put it in there, it has to be put in correctly in order for it to work. And this transfer paper that I've shown you is only for laser printers. Do not use it in a bubble jet or inkjet or any other type of printer. It has to be a laser printer. Now it can work with a monochrome or a color, it doesn't matter, as long as it's a laser printer. It's specially designed to handle the heat of a laser printer so that the image that you're printing will actually burn onto the transfer paper, so that when you lay it down, it has a uniform color. It presses onto the leather or wood or whatever you're going to use it on properly, and it works as was intended. So there you have it. Now I'm going to come back here. You're going to see it's printed out. See the top portion. You can see the arrow right there. So the top of the paper, when you open the tray, is not the print side. Underneath the top of that paper is the print side, as you can see. And you can see it's been printed with the image reflected or mirrored, so that when you actually lay it onto the item that you're going to heat press to, it heat presses properly. Okay, the transfer paper actually says on the back of it, print other side. So that right here where the yellow lettering is, that in my particular printer, I want facing up, because it's going to print on the glossy side, not on this side. And I've already determined that my printer prints on the bottom of the page, not the top. So I'll actually have that lettering, print other side, is going to be facing up, because that's the part of the paper that I'm not going to print to. It's going to be the other side it's going to print to. Once you get the heat transfer paper prepared, you're good to go. It's now time to trim or cut them into pieces. Now, Jodo actually recommends that you cover the entire surface of your project with the transfer paper in order to create something that's uniform. And I mean, I can see their point, but you can also cut it into pieces like what I'm doing so that you don't waste an entire sheet just for one project. In this case, I'm going to cut just one section out of this transfer paper with this one particular image. Now, these are copyrighted images that I paid for on Etsy, and I bought a commercial license for them, but I'm not intending to provide them for you specifically. You'll have to find your own images, and the images I'm using here are just for personal use. I'm not going to be selling the product that I'm going to be making with this image, just so you know. So I'm cutting out this image, and once I get it all cutted out, you can see the lettering has been reflected so that it'll print properly. I'm going to round the edges because I find that when you have a sharp edge and you do this, where you just do part of the transfer paper onto an object that's actually larger, it's good to have a rounded edge. It's less likely for something to snag on that edge or corner and actually peel it off of the leather. So that's why I'm going to sort of round the edge. And then in a second here, I'll show you what leather I'm going to be putting this on. Heat transfer paper, the kind that's made by Jodo Imaging, is a little expensive. At roughly 85 cents a sheet, it can add up to an expense. That's why I personally wouldn't use an entire sheet for one project. I would print as many images as you can onto one piece and then just cut them out and use them piecemeal. That way you maximize the amount that you're going to be using. Okay, so this is the project I'm actually going to be using this fishing graphic on, and I'm going to heat press it right onto this lamb hide that has been dyed. So this is the actual document or the instruction guide that you can download from Jodo's website. I'm showing it here so you get a sense for how it's laid out or what kind of materials also that they will work with. This particular transfer paper, it works on metal, leather, wood, ceramic, acrylic, puzzles, mugs, tiles, crystal, glass, magnets, metal, wood, aluminum, stainless steel, all these different substances. This particular transfer paper that I'm suggesting that can be printed out in a regular laser printer, not bubble jet or inkjet, it has to be a laser. You can then print on any of these substances. So I'm going to do the leather specifically, and even though it says the leather here is on page 3, we're actually looking for page 11. So I'm going to go down here to page 11 and read the instructions here real quick. Any white or light colored leather fabric. Materials required: a heat press, a laser printer, a foam heat pad, and leather fabric. Insert the heat transfer paper into your print tray and then print a mirrored copy of that onto the transfer paper. Next, you're going to take that image, you're going to trim it or use the whole entire paper, which is what they suggest, and you're going to lay it on the substrate or the material, in this case leather, with the mirrored image, the actual image facing downward. Then you're going to take a foam heat pad, is what they suggest. In my case, I use waxed paper. You're going to place it on the top of the heat transfer image piece that's been laid on the leather. You're going to put it over the whole thing, set the oven or the heat press for 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you're going to set the burning or heat surface down onto the image and the leather for 50 seconds. I do 40 seconds, but you can do 50 seconds. And here's an extremely important point here. It says use heavy pressure. Now it says peel hot, but in another area it actually suggests peel cool. So you can do either one. I've had both work and I've had both fail. This is my heat press. It's not a particularly good one or big one. It's good for about 8.5 by 11 tops. You really don't want to do anything more than that. It's made by Hobby Light. It's an older model, but it's all I could afford. And it does provide a good heat distribution. That's one of the reasons why I chose it. Now, before you set to the task of doing this, the first thing you need to do is to set your heat press temperature. Most heat presses take a little while to heat up, and you want to make sure that that temperature is in place and good to go before you actually do anything. And you might as well get it started right off the bat. In this case, I set my dial for 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And then once you've got that set, you're going to lay down your substrate. The smooth side, which is what I'm going to be printing the image onto, will be facing upwards. Now, they recommend using a heating pad, but I'm going to use wax paper, and I'm going to set it over the top of the actual transfer paper that I'm going to be putting on it and the substrate. I'm just showing what side you're going to have up, what side down. So you're going to lay it on your leather where you want it to be positioned. I have little marks on the leather that shows where it's supposed to be so that I know exactly where to put it. So I lay it down there, I position it in place. Be careful, sometimes it likes to curl up and it has a hard time staying in place, unfortunately. They do have tape, which I don't have the money to buy, that you can use to tape this in place that won't be damaged or won't stick to the leather or anything else. But I just take my chances, unfortunately. That's kind of how I roll. And then I'm going to lay the wax paper over the top of it. It's been positioned. I've got wax paper over it. Now it is time to, this is already at the temperature. The light went off, which means it's good to go. You gotta be really careful here. Set my timer. Should have done this beforehand. Okay. So it's at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've got my timer set for 40 seconds. So let me get this oriented, and I'm going to drop it down. Try not to shift it. Get it nice and tight, and then start. Keep that weight on there. That's why I'm using this lock grip right here, so I can put that pressure on it, to keep the pressure on. Once it hits 40 seconds, then I'll bring it back up again. It's not wanting to stay down. Okay, that's 40 seconds. I lift it up. Slide it over and see how it did. Now there's two ways to do this. I can actually wait for this to dry before I peel this off right here, or I can try to peel it off now. The problem you run into, if I pull it off now, sometimes it peels the acrylic off. So in this case, I'm going to actually let it dry. As you can see, it didn't wrinkle or it didn't damage the leather, which is what you're shooting for. You can usually tell, because if the leather is damaged in any way, it wrinkles. So I'm going to set this aside, let it dry. Stop this because it's making a bunch of noise. It's annoying. Reset it. And I'm going to show you a couple of other pieces just to give you an idea of what to expect. Okay, here's my second attempt at doing this. I've created a piece. I've got it good to go. I'm going to set it on down now. And I forgot to set my timer. So I'm going to set it for 35. It's all clinched down now. So I'm going to use a piece of leather like this, another one like this, to see how it goes. Because that's a nice clean print there. And then there's a little red dot right there, fortunately. One sec, it's almost done here. Got 3 seconds left. Okay. Stop this. Reset. And when I peel this, usually what I do is I sort of just roll it over and in order to lift up an edge like that. That's how I usually peel it. And I peel it at an angle like that. Another good successful print. As you can see, that's actually nice and clean. This leather, this thicker white leather, seems to hold really well and handle that heat really well. And I find that with the thicker leather. So I'm going to show you one. So I've made 2 of them that are good at this point. Now I'm going to try a different color and show you. I'm not even going to bother with veg tan, I'll be honest with you. Veg tan never works. So I'm going to stick to the ones that I know actually, where I've actually been able to do it and have it work. So you'll see here, this is the one that I did earlier. This was the one that I printed. Remember how I reversed the image so that when it actually prints, it prints correctly. And then that'll be the actual pouch that I'm working on, like so. Okay? And this is lamb hide. Lamb hide I've never had fail. I've always had lamb hide work. So these are the 3 projects that I've been working on that have all been heat pressed. This is a glass case that I made where I took just a regular glass case and I covered it with lamb hide. Turned out okay. And this is a little pouch that I'm working on. I've already done the braiding here. I still have to braid all along the edge, and then that will be a little braided pouch made out of lamb hide with a neat little image on the back. That's been heat pressed. Leave that open. And then this is a cell phone case I'm working on right now, where this was heat pressed on. I made a little cross there, and now I still have to glue it in place after I put a little lining material, glue it and stitch it into place, and then this will be finished. So that's one of the other projects I'm working on. So heat press can be done. The trick is just finding the right leather and being really careful. And sometimes leather won't work, sometimes it does. It's trial and error, and my biggest recommendation I can make is to make sure that you do a sample size. So thanks for watching How to Do It Heat Press. I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors.